John O'Brien here. You see on social media this time of year the question, well, what's the best fall blend? And my reaction is usually to try to give a really long answer and a lot of words. And we realize there's a lot of people that just want a simple answer, which is fine. But that is about the now. Food plotting, fall planning. Here's my perspective. For those of you guys that don't know my background, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm a researcher. I do research. I've done research for 3 other large companies. I have my own distribution company, a wildlife company, research plots, educational plots, test plots on sand ground, all different kinds of ground. Work with people all over the United States. Okay, enough about me. Here's my perspective. No matter where you live, Maine, Florida, Texas, Idaho, there's one thing that's a common thread: Mother Nature. When I get involved in the early days of alternative forages, many of the forages you're seeing now for wildlife were first used and brought on by the early grazing movement, the land stewardship, people of that nature, which I was a part of back in the early 90s. The one thing I learned from the start was Mother Nature can be cruel, and she can be great. How many of you guys know what the weather's going to be this fall in your area? Some of you guys might have dry periods, then wet periods, then cold periods, then hot periods. You might have 4 different types of weather in one growing season. How many forages tolerate wet, dry, hot, and cold? Think about that. So when some people look at some of the mixes I've formulated, they might be like, God, John, I don't quite get this. Here's what you need to get. Here's what I want you guys to think about. What I just said, Mother Nature. You want to also consider what grows the fastest tends to be most palatable early. What grows the slowest tends to not be as attractive early on, but more attractive later on. Yes, there's variables and other factors that come into play. Again, Mother Nature, wet periods, forages that don't love wet aren't very nutritious or palatable during wet periods. Forages that don't like dry don't tend to do very well, or are not as the preferred forage during dry periods. Basic concepts. And again, everybody talks about pH. pH is this much of a factor. A lot of people don't quite understand pH. Most companies don't understand pH. They think, well, you just need to be in that 6.0 to 7.0 range and you're good to go. No. Cation anion exchange, CC numbers, soil organic matter, soil surface residue. You could have the perfect pH, 6.5, perfect phosphorus levels, perfect potassium levels, and still be seeing deficiency symptoms, no matter what you plant, right? Yes. Because a high amount of people watching me right here, right now, do not have very alive, thriving soil. So no matter if you buy that fancy bag, the one that's gave you success year after year, the one your buddy tells you is an outstanding fall blend, but you have stress conditions in your soil, you don't have a lot of worms, you don't have beneficial fungi, you didn't plant last year to benefit this year. Let's touch on that. Most people plan for the now. What's in that bag, that basic mix that no matter what's in there, it's great because somebody told you it was, or you saw that it was great. What makes it great? The soil. How you manipulate that mix. That seed is only as good as that 7 to 14 days. The job's done. Is your job done? Is your soil's job done? It moves into a period where roots are developing. You could have the perfect pH, perfect nutrient levels, but are you growing roots? Are you creating an environment that roots are able to thrive? When you have thriving, developing, well-branched root systems, what is the benefit of that? That's the most important thing. That's the engine. That's like our gut. That's the powerhouse. That's what handles stress. That's what handles drought. That's what handles wet. Helps bring in those nutrients. Most people are not bringing in nutrients very effectively. And yeah, there's ways to circumvent it. We will not be talking about it now. the now. That's why people, when they talk to me, when they listen to me, when they attend my seminars, when they look at my blends, they're like, this is different. I don't see stuff like this. Hell yeah, it's different because Mother Nature is the first thing in my mind. Biodiversity, next in my mind. My Bible says, thou shalt not plant in less than threes. Yes, there's some exceptions. Corn, canna maize, some cases soybeans, although I prefer to always overseed into beans because of erosion control, looking ahead to the future, conservation, bio-drilling, other factors like that. Sorghum, some grain sorghums we can seed straight, but then again, I love overseeding into grain sorghum as well. So, and alfalfa. Straight alfalfa works in some spots as well for those that are able to manage them. So, why do we plant in threes or more? We always want to have something that tolerates wet, something that tolerates dry, something that tolerates hot, something that tolerates cold. Biodiversity. That's what the farming world does. That's what I bring to the wildlife industry. That's what I'm bringing to you right here, right now. And also, backing up, I remember I said what tends to be most attractive early is what grows the fastest. What tends to be most attractive later tends to be what grows a little slower. Anything that reaches maturity, forages, turnips reach maturity in 60 days, radishes in 45 to 50 days. Some forage turnip crosses mature in 45, 50 days. Some forages like Winford brassica mature in 80 to 90 days. Swedes, 150 days. Every forage has a maturity date. As that forage just gets right close to the maturity date, within a week or so, that's when they're the most desirable. Once it gets to maturity and starts going into reproduction, it starts dropping. Some forages plunge at that point. They become less than ideal. That's why you want diversity. That's why you want biodiversity. That's why you want staggered genetics. That's why you want something that grows fast, something that's intermediate, something that's a little slower growing typically. A lot, and then some people might say, well, but I'm in the South. What's growing in the North doesn't work for me. Oh, contraire. Most genetics, where does it come from? New Zealand, Australia, Oregon, Washington, not the upper Midwest. A lot of genetics is actually Southern, which means it works great in the South and the North. No matter what the genetics is, you're your own unique individual. Your property is unique. No matter if you got 100 of you guys watching now have very similar levels of nutrients. Nobody's got the same aliveness. I can't think of a better term right now. Nobody has the same soil microbial conditions. Soil. Everybody looks at crude. Think of it as like our gut again. What can you do to make yourself feel better? Can you take probiotics? We won't go into that, but again, stop and think about that. So now, what's the best fall mix? I already told you my opinion, which is based on years of research and experience and working with people all over the United States. So we got diversity. Yeah, you're like, yeah, but what's the best forage I should plant? My answer is usually opposite of what most people that are watching here now would think, and most wildlife companies would think. Why is that? I live out there. The deer are smarter than us. And again, there's other factors that come into play. Most wildlife companies are in the business to make money. A lot of genetics is cheap. A lot of brassicas are not multi-grays. There's some differences in species. There's forages you rarely see in wildlife blends that are very high in Brix, sugar, which leads to attraction. Because a lot of you guys might see, I just want to plant something that the deer will eat. Something the deer will eat. Here's what most people don't think about. What will make deer eat what they eat when they eat it? You, your management, your soil health. So you plant your diversity. You fertilize right. You plant in the right place, the right time, the right way. And in your case, you should be thinking about the future. A lot of farmers, you've heard the term cover crops. That's what food plots should be. Cover crops. Some people say, let's keep throughout the year living roots. I always say 365-day nutrition. Some people in the industry will say, well, let the neighbors feed the deer, et cetera, et cetera. But think about it this way. If you're going to try to have 365-day nutrition, or even if that's not a concern for you, the concern should be erosion control, conservation, having that soil stay alive. When you don't have prolonged periods of time of living roots, you're failing. That's my biggest issue with not having food plots that are growing actively, trying to have as your end goal 365-day nutrition. 365-day nutrition is great for deer, but it's great for the soil. So when you're planting your fall food plots, are you planting anything in there that could be fixating nitrogen? So when that free nitrogen is available for future crops, you don't have to use as much nitrogen? What happens when you don't have to use as much nitrogen in 2021? It means your pHs are less likely to drop. It also means you don't have to open up your pocketbook as much to purchase as much fertilizers and supplements. Novel concept, right? Some things you can plant this fall also reduce weeds in subsequent crops, which means you might have to spray. And when you don't have to spray, it is also better for your pocketbook and soil health. What else can happen with your fall management and your food plots? You could be planting some species that are great for bio-drilling, which reduces compaction. Compaction is a huge issue, more of an issue than most people realize. How many of you guys got a soil compaction probe? Stay tuned. I'll show some videos on that. Some great little stories I could share in regard to that. Every time you drive over your land, no matter what you're driving over it with, compaction becomes more of an issue. Every time you work the soil, compaction becomes an issue. Every time you use a tiller, you're killing your soil and you're shrinking the particles of soil and increasing compaction is a factor. Beneficial organisms and fungi, mycorrhizae, things that guys are like, what is John talking about? Okay, not a big deal, but just think of it this way. We want our soil to be alive. We want to create conditions where next year's crop is going to have natural growth promoters. Yes, there's forages and forage cocktails that'll do that. Yeah, there's some programs out there that guys talk about their system. I have different opinions on that. Because it's not about the bag. It's about the cause and effect. So when you're planning for the future, yes, the goal should be, yeah, we're going to maximize tonnage in the fall. Yes, we're going to maximize attraction in the fall because I just want to see deer. But also part of the equation is when you do those things right, develop roots more effectively, fertilize more effectively, scout your crops more effectively, you're going to have higher yield. Most average food plot fall blends average 2 to 2.5 tons of forage dry matter per acre. Average. Do you know there's Do you know there's blends and forages that can yield 3, 4 ton in the fall? You can have double the yield. Who would not want to get 4 ton of yield on an acre versus 2? Blows my mind. Why you wouldn't? What also happens when you get 4 ton of yield versus 2? You also get more protein, more minerals, more energy. Energy. Animals eat to meet their energy requirements. Part of the factor is you have more highly digestible, higher yielding forages. Even if they're yielding only 10%, 20% higher, you also will tend to have 10% better feed efficiency, which means you just increase the effective size of your plot by another 10%. So I know I said a lot here, but here's my challenge. Everybody loves what they love for a reason. Ask who you're potentially going to work with, why did you formulate that mix the way you did? I'd love everybody to ask that. And also, I'd love to hear some answers on why people do what they do. And we're not going to talk about copying other people and because somebody told somebody that it works, and et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, so also Pure Life seed. How much seed is actually in the bag of what you're going to plant? How big is that bag? Forget about what it says on the bag, how much it covers. My challenge is for you guys to know what it should cover. Could you be buying an acre's worth of seed that really only gives you 72, 75% coverage if you seed right? I know, a high percentage of people seed a little heavy. Maybe that's what some of these companies are doing for you. They're taking that in effect. They're like, you cannot plant effectively, so we're not going to put as much seed in the bag, Pure Life seed. You'll end up with 100% stand. How about, you know how much seed should go down? Also, when you look at your tags, let's just say if you have 4 species in there that are all in there at 25%. How many of you guys know that doesn't mean the final stand percentage is going to be 25%? What is your plot supposed to look like? What is the final stand percentage? How will you fertilize? If you don't know how much yield that blend is going to grow, then how do you know how to fertilize? If you don't know how much calcium is removed, phosphorus, potassium is removed by that forage, sulfur, hugely important, then how do you know how to fertilize? Because the soil lab tells you how to do it, right? Challenge, every one of you guys, call local soil testing lab or forage testing lab, soil testing lab. Ask to get a copy of their samples for Ladino clover, medium red clover, Winifred brassica, turnips, radish, different forages that you plant. Most labs have a library that's very minuscule. So it's all basically a guess, right? By most companies, by most people. How do you know? That's why 95% of the soil samples I get back, I see, are imbalanced. Because all you guys are guessing. Stop guessing. Take your own plant tissue analysis. Take your soil samples. Look at each. Connect the dots. Measure yield. All this seems complicated to some of you guys. Again, I know I'm hearing it right now. I just want to shoot a deer in a plot and I want something that looks good. Parting words. Do you know what the lowest yielding forages are for fall planting? Fall rye, oats, wheat, triticale, barley, grains. Yeah, deer will eat them, right? Why are they great? Because they don't remove much for nutrients, so it's hard for you to screw up the soil. You don't have to put as much for nutrients down, right? That's an advantage. There's trials out there. Do you know how every day that ticks after July 25th in most areas upper Midwest, yields drop? So even something as simple as oats. There's trials by the University of Wisconsin. Look them up, you'll find them. July 25th, 2 ton. You could get down to only 1,000 pounds of forage dry matter per year. When you get out there, I think the date was August 24, something like that. So know when to plant. Plant diversity. Plant things that yield for your management. Plant things that yield on your soil. Plant things that yield in your topography. So just a few things to think about when you make your decisions, and instead of being, what's the best mix I could plant in the fall? What's the best thing I can plant in the fall that will benefit me in 2021 and beyond? Thanks for your time. You can ask any questions. I'm more than willing to get in more depth and do this again if you guys all like what this has been about. Thank you.